Hello, everyone. You are listening to SheLeads with Carly. I'm your host, Carly Malatsky, and my guest today is Tamar Shachar. Tamar is an experienced executive and entrepreneur with experience in mobile and web in B2C environments. Currently, she's the vice president of product at Lumen, a wellness device and app that measures your metabolism and provides valuable insight based on your metabolic data. Prior to Lumen, she was a chief product officer at Worthy.com, the VP of product for Sears in Israel, founded her own company called Grab It, and if that's not enough, she was also even the CRO, Chief Revenue Officer for Logia, which was acquired by Digital Turbine. So much to unpack here. I'm incredibly excited to have you on the show, Tamar. Thank you for joining.
Thanks, Carly. Great to be here.
Of course. So, Tamar, let's start from the beginning. You got a bachelor's in economics and psychology from Tel Aviv University. Take me through that process. At this point, did you know what your career would be? Did you go down the financial track, or how are you imagining your career?
Right. Yeah. So actually, when I looked at my degree, I didn't think about my career at all. I only wanted to study the things that are interesting for me. It turned out to be a great base for what I'm doing today. But
Amazing.
I actually decided to study psychology because I was always interested in people, in how we make decisions, in what motivates us, and so on. And that was super interesting. And I actually focused in my studies really on around brain and how we make decisions and so on. And the economics part was, for me, it was kind of complementing, looking at kind of more analytical elements and like the left side of the brain. And it was
Yeah.
a great combination. And by the way, my masters were in business. So I did my MBA in INSEAD.
Right.
And the combination of the two gave me really a great start, I think, for things I did later on, starting from business and strategy. But then in product, I can say that I think the business studies gave me gives me still a great base for understanding markets and trends and how do you build a competitive advantage and so on and competition. And the psychology part helps me really with understanding people, which in our case are users,
Yeah.
and understand their behavior, understand their decision making, and what motivates them, and so on. So I think in listening, being able to listen and to be empathetic to users, and specifically, by the way, on Lumen today, where we are helping people make a behavioral change. So even though the journey we build for them is really science-based, that's not enough.
Yeah.
We need to understand and we need to help people believe in themselves that they can actually make the change and understanding what can motivate them and how do you build self-efficacy and so on. So it turned out to be a great base for later on in my career.
Yeah, it's perfect. Also, even, what I've learned already about product management, which we'll obviously talk about, but that combination, right? Like the business, the strategy, the economics, and then the psychology, that seems like the perfect like epitome of product. So I think that's excellent. So at this
Yeah.
point, did you hear about product management, or how did you break into product?
Not at all. That was completely off like my direction in my career. I actually started my career really in more business and strategy positions, right? I did my MBA. That was the right thing to do. Uh, and by the way, I loved it because strategy is around problem solving. And that's one of the things I love the most, is figuring out the problems and how to solve them. So actually, twice in my early career, I joined in a more business and strategy position and shifted on that specific job to that specific company to do a product. And I'll give you a story of one of these cases. I worked at Logia.
Okay.
Um, and Logia, I came as a CRO, Chief Revenue Officer. And in that position, it was clear that the current business of the company is actually declining. And I was there in order to define what's the strategy, where should we go, what could be the new business. And I did the whole strategy thing, and we agreed on what's the right way. And as a result of that, it was clear that we need to build a completely new line of products. Like the existing solutions we had were not relevant for what we needed to do.
Wow.
And as such, okay, great. So we know what we need to do, but now we need to do it. And I was, even without asking myself, I realized that that's what I need to do. And I started building the product in a sense from scratch. And, you know, in order to build a product, so I think I understood the market very well. I talked with our customers and potential customers and understood their needs really well. So understanding the business, understanding the technology, and understanding the users basically enabled to build this product. And the product was super successful because it really met the needs of our customers. And actually later on, when Logia was acquired by Digital Turbine, mainly because of this asset, of this new
Wow.
product that we had, and still it's a flagship product there. Yeah, so it was really around, I think, in a sense, product has a lot of understanding of strategy in it, of understanding, and then actually making it happen, understanding the users and so on.
Yeah.
So that's how I actually came into product. It's a bit different, I would say, maybe than the
Yeah.
traditional way, let's
And
say.
it seems like for you, and I guess I'm curious, was it a seamless transition or were there things, now that you're owning this new product and going in a completely different direction, were there surprises and you kind of were like, okay, maybe I don't know this aspect of being a product manager, I don't know this aspect of leading a whole new product? Were there challenges that you faced?
Definitely. And I can tell you that, what from the perspective that I have today, so many things that I didn't know
Yeah.
at that point. Um, so I think when actually you build a product, when you start diving deep, then you realize so many problems that you couldn't realize when you hypothesized about what's the solution, right? And
Yeah.
what's the right way to go. And that's fascinating, I think. It's like, so you keep on getting constraints that you were not aware of, or maybe you understood something a bit differently about the need, but then actually, when you have a solution, you say, I missed a little bit. That wasn't exactly the need. So actually, it's like going diving deep kind to the details and going back up to the understanding of what needs to be done. And this top-down and bottom-up approach, I think, enables really building a good product. So I think I underestimated, in a sense, how complicated it is to build the right product
Right.
for the specific problem that you identify. Usually we say in product, you deal with a problem space and the solution space, right?
Yeah.
I think the problem space is super critical. You need to nail it. You need to really understand and crystallize it. But then when you deal with the solution space, you also need to make sure that you really nail it down. And if it's not, if it doesn't really doesn't solve the problem that well, then you need to try in another way and maybe polish it a little bit
Yeah.
and so on. Like continue until you actually nail it. So I think that's what I've learned. It's easier said than being done, but it's so actually to make it happen and to see the product then live and meeting solving the problem is a huge it's a great feeling. So
Yeah. So I want to dive into that a little bit more. So you mentioned how part of being a product manager is this iteration, right? You think this is going to solve the problem, you get it to users and actually, they do a whole different thing with it that you didn't expect. How do you keep your team, now that you're a leader in product, how do you make sure that your team stays motivated, right? Like even, and that could be the engineer who maybe developed the product and they've put, a lot of work, the designer. How does each of them stay motivated to be like, okay, it's not what we expected. We have to go back, do it again. And does that come up a lot where it's like a challenge?
definitely, I think that's a huge challenge. Um, so just before even answering specifically your question, I think that's one of the things you learn
Yeah.
in product management. You learn that even though you think you had like the right solution, in so many cases it's not exactly that. Might be in the bigger picture that you got it completely wrong, but in most cases that's not the case. In most cases, it's small things that you can,
Okay.
um, as you said, iterate and improve. Um, and I think understanding that and talking about it and explaining that that's exactly how it should be. Like there are no miracles,
Right.
right? Maybe sometimes, like sometimes you get it right the first time. Usually it's not the case. And
Yeah.
I think accepting that and talking about it, that's the one thing. The second thing is I think finding the right processes that will enable to run really quickly. Because if you invest 3 months or 6 months in something and then you realize it's wrong, too bad. you better realize it like much quicker, right? So finding the right methodologies and processes in order to fail quickly, I'm not saying something that is new,
Yeah.
but I think that's the reality. So quick iterations, learn really quickly, build a culture of constantly learning and constantly checking if you actually made an impact, does it solve the problem, and progress from there. So I think it's talking about it, understanding that's the case, and building really the methodologies to run really quickly and
Yeah.
fail fast and try again.
I love that. I think also when we talked earlier, even you mentioned this idea of a great product manager is able to hold strongly to, or have a strong opinion, but hold it loosely, right? Is that
Yeah, exactly. Strong opinions loosely held.
exactly? Because I think that also contributes, right, to the motivation aspect. It's like, okay, this is what I believe what will happen, but it's also not the end of the world if we end up changing and going a different direction. So I think that's great.
Exactly that. And actually, if I think it's also a question of how do you measure your product managers, right? Like and if I measure on actually um, in the end, it's the impact, right?
Yeah.
We are measuring the impact, but I'm not measuring like, oh, you did a mistake, that's terrible. No, you did a mistake. Let's learn from that and let's improve next time in order to make an impact. So if that's the message and it's not okay to fail, then it's completely fine. And I
Yeah.
think actually also like accepting really that I was wrong. That's something we need to learn to do, to accept that I was wrong. That's fine. Now I understand. This is what I believe in now. Convince people and run to that direction. So definitely strong opinions loosely held.
Yes, I love that. Also, it's weird you mentioned this. I watched a video earlier today, and it's this idea of building a vulnerable work environment. And it's exactly what you said. And it's not about, being vulnerable isn't about saying, crying and being vulnerable yourself, but rather being able to say, like, yeah, I was wrong, or it's okay, you made a mistake. Now let's work through it, or let's learn from it. So it's exactly that. I think
Yeah.
that's such a testament of, leadership and everything. So that's great. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. You have more?
I wanted to say
Of
about,
course.
yeah, on that point, I think one of the challenges, maybe I'm kind of skipping, but one of the challenges I think of leading product teams also around that is to what extent do you let your people fail
Yeah.
in order to learn from that versus jump in and try to solve it in a sense for them. And it's also around this point because I think like we need to find the right balance, right? But I think if you do let people make mistakes and fail and learn from that, then on the longer term, they become so much stronger as
Wow.
product managers.
Yeah.
So
Is there something in particular that you maybe are looking for in a new PM when you're interviewing, when you're looking to hire, that maybe you'll be able to tell that they'll learn that they could fail, but they'll take it in a good positive mindset and will learn from it?
it's interesting that you're asking because I think above all the things that we're looking in a good PM, one of the things that I'm usually like when in the process, when a potential product manager presents, let's say, an assignment, like the home assignment,
Right.
or if we have a discussion on site of a product problem, then one of the things that I'm actually looking at is in the discussion, I'm usually trying to provide new inputs or constraints that then the PM needs to deal with new inputs.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I'm actually looking at is how do they cope with that?
Ah.
Do they actually protect their opinion no matter what I say? Do they try to incorporate and actually find a new solution? And for me, that's a very important thing to look at when looking to hire a PM.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I feel like also in the interview, like as the interviewee, I feel like it's so easy to be like, why did I choose this? Oh, let me tell you why. Let me defend it to its core. And then even if you say something else, I'll be like, no, I can prove that it's the
Yeah,
best answer. But I think what you said is just
yeah, and
counters that.
actually,
It flips it on its head. Yeah.
yeah, but it's a balance, right? Because I want the person that presenting or this like actually to have a strong
Right.
opinion. But if I provide new data to the discussion, then how do you deal with that,
Right,
right? So
exactly. No, it's great. Okay, we've gone off track, but it's been incredible. But I want to go
sorry,
back
yeah.
to you decided to start your own company, and I want to know, how did this inspiration happen? Did you always have this entrepreneurial itch that you were like, okay, now is my turn to be completely, the owner of a whole new company?
Yeah, so I'll tell you first of all a little bit about Grabit.
Okay.
That's a company I founded. Grabit is let's say a marketplace for small, medium brands or shops that they were looking to leverage on their customer or their client base to actually sell directly to them. And I founded it with Daria Shuali. She was, I would say, the domain expert. She understood these shops and the fashion area, industry and so on. And I was more the product and business person. And we decided to really start this company because, one, we believe there's a strong need. And two, as you said, I think both of us had this urge. We had this urge, I think, to build something from scratch and like to have in that like there's something about, I think a product manager in general is the owner of their product,
Right.
but I think founders is, one level above that
Right.
of owning the whole thing, not only the product, but, the business and building the team and the funding and so on. So yes, I think I had this urge in me. And I think many product managers have such an urge. And not surprisingly, I think many of the founders that you see in companies actually come from product. So it goes hand in hand.
Right.
Um, so
So yeah,
yeah, do you want to tell me about this?
I want to. So you bring up you kind of draw a similarity between product managers and entrepreneurs, and I can, it's easy to draw that conclusion. I want to dive into it a little bit deeper. Do you feel that your experience as a product manager kind of set you up for success as an entrepreneur, or were there some, some friction and you had to learn a whole new aspect of being an entrepreneur, maybe, trying to find funding and that whole aspect of it?
So I think it did. I think it's a great background to become a founder
Right.
because especially in tech companies, in product-led companies, the first thing that needs to be great is the product. Then, of course, it's not sufficient, right? You need to have great marketing, you need to have the funding and so on, like so many other things. But I think that's the base. And as I said, I think being a PM, you own the
Yeah.
product. So the ownership and accountability, it's all there already. The problem solving thinking is definitely there as well. Of course, as a founder, you're facing with so many other challenges and actually finding the balance of where you put your attention is super challenging as
Right.
well. Like you need to deal with funding and okay and the business decisions and so on, and actually with the founders themselves and how do you work together
Yeah.
as a team. So there are many challenges, but as you said, I do see similarities.
So,
By the way, I think PM
yeah.
is the most interesting position in the world, because it's so like owning and having the responsibility and being strong in so many things, which as a founder you need to be as well. You need to understand business, you need to understand the users, you need to understand
Right.
technology, and you're kind of in the middle of all of that. So,
Yeah. Okay. So obviously, passion for product, that's so, I can see it. I want to ask you now, what is the worst part about being a product manager? What is the hardest part?
so I think the hardest part is you're responsible, you're
Yeah.
accountable, right? But you don't manage anyone, as we know. So, like, how do you have to be like you're always accountable. And if something doesn't go well, you're the person responsible. If things go well, it's all of us
Yeah, exactly. Right.
responsible, right? So I think that's tough.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that is tough. The other thing I think that is difficult is, as we said earlier, right? You're leading. So as a leader, you need to have a vision and understanding where you're taking the product. And as we said earlier, in many cases you fail, and then you still need the team to go after you and believe in you.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, a second challenge. And I think the third one is again like one is finding the balance between focusing on the product and in your team on working on the product, but then also you have so many other interfaces usually in the company and outside the company, and you need to pay attention to them as well, and finding the balance between listening
Mm.
but also staying eyes on the ball. So finding this balance is
Yeah.
challenging.
So kind of touching on those last two, and especially now as a VP of product at Lumen, which obviously we'll get into even more. But one thing that's so interesting to me is being able to listen to many voices. So on the one hand, you have your users, right? And you're making sure that you are, always doing what with them first in mind. But on the other hand, especially as a VP, you're thinking of the business strategy of Lumen, right? And what the roadmap looks like, what the future looks like. How do these ever conflict? How do you balance the two? How do you control, like how do you focus essentially?
You ask if they ever conflict, they conflict most of the
Yeah, okay.
time.
Okay, good to know. Exactly.
Yeah, it's so yes, as a as the product leader, let's say either being a VP product or a CPO, um, building a product strategy. Um, the difficult part, I would say, is the not knowing what to do, but also knowing what not to do.
Mm,
And that's usually where the conflicts come in place. So let's say I decide not to do, I don't know, a specific thing that many other people in the company think is important. So you will
yeah.
constantly get this input, or let's do that, do that. Or I don't know, if you have, let's say, many people in the company talk to users, let's say CS, right? And they know the users not less than us in product know them, right? And they will say, listen, our users are saying they want this, they want this, they want this. And they might be right, right? And then the challenge is to take actually that input, understand the need that lays behind, let's say, the requirement, and understand if this problem is important enough um, in order to actually solve it. So it's super
Yeah.
challenging. And I think you need to learn to say a lot of no, but not to take it to the extreme, because it's also sometimes this slope is slippery, but you really still need to listen. So find again the processes, the methodologies, to meet once in a
Right.
while, to get the inputs, to have discussions around them. And a product strategy is a product strategy, and it's super important to have it. But it's also in many cases you change it because the inputs change,
Yeah.
right? Um,
Yeah, exactly.
so
I
I think that gives the
I'm
picture.
curious, after Grab It, you then went on to Sears, Worthy.com as a chief product officer, and now obviously VP of product at Lumen, which, by the way, is such a fascinating product, and I'm excited to talk more. But what I'm curious about is I tend to ask this in all my episodes, but when these opportunities came up, what were you optimizing for? Were you thinking of, okay, this is now a new leadership opportunity. I'll have more responsibility. This will look great, for where I see myself going in the product track? Or is it more, the company and the impact it's making? Or how were you thinking of these new opportunities, and what made you say, okay, this is right for me?
Yeah, great question. So for me, I would say there are two important, like there were always two important things, and I would say that now added maybe another
Okay.
one. The first thing is I need to believe both in the problem space and in the solution space. What do I mean by that? So I need to really believe that the company is like the problem we're dealing with is worth enough problem to deal with in terms of the size of the problem and in terms of the opportunity. And in the solution space, I would say, depending on how evolved is the company, but is the solution actually solving the problem? And what would it take to improve it and take it to the next level of solving the problem? Um, or or actually, like if there's still a big gap, but there's something very initial, actually that I can believe that I could help close this gap of the solution towards the problem. So the first thing for me is really believing in and loving, I would even say, the problem space and the specific solution that the company has. So that's the first thing. The second thing is for me is definitely
Right.
people, and people I can learn from, people that the people that I would even say share the same values. I think that's also very important, and that I would love being with. We spend so many hours a day in the office or at work, and so for me, that's a super, super critical decision
Yeah.
point. And I would say, I think, the third thing is really to make an impact. But we're always talking about making an impact, but we're always talking about making an impact with the problem, with a product to actually solve the problem. But for me, it's also around making a product for an impact in areas where I care about. So it can be either sustainability or social causes like empowering women or social inequality or
Yeah.
and specifically now at Lumen, it's really around wellness and health, which is an area that I um, didn't understand how important it is before I actually met Lumen and understood how important is solving actually or helping solve the problem in that
Yeah.
area.
No,
So,
that's
and
excellent.
if you want, I can say a few words about Lumen and why like that's the choice,
No,
but whatever you
exactly.
say.
That was my next question is tell me a little bit more about Lumen and what does it look like in a day-to-day of a VP of product?
Yes, okay. So at Lumen, as you mentioned the opening, we're really helping people make a behavioral change towards becoming metabolically healthier. And the problem today in the world, specifically in the US, but in generally in the world, is huge. People don't understand how they harm themselves with, wrong nutrition, with not being active enough. And what we're really trying to do is help them change habits and build healthy habits, let's call it, really to and impact their metabolically health, and believe in themselves that actually they can do the
Yeah.
change. So the beauty of it is that we have this really small device that you can breathe into, and by breathing into it, you understand your metabolic state, and this immediate biofeedback is amazing in its strength of understanding how things I did actually impact me, right? So having this science and understanding what actually can help people with, as I mentioned at the beginning, like understanding the psychology behind it and understanding that people, first of all, need to believe that they can make this change and help them feel a sense of success and help them feel a sense of control in order to encourage these positive behavior and to maintain them, which is usually the
Yeah.
difficult part. So that's kind of the big challenge, and in leading the product at Lumen, then I would say that finding this balance between science, data driven, and so on, and the psychology is difficult,
Right.
right? Because I'll give you an example. You want a person to start adopting positive habit. Do you start with like super easy stuff for them to adopt, but they won't make that much of an impact on their metabolic state? Or do you say, no, I want them to retain and I want them to actually continue with the journey. So let's start with things that will see immediate
Right.
impact, right? Just as an
Yeah.
example. How do you, and so on. So you have many such challenges, product wise, I mean, and leading the product team here, the product is a complex one. We have hardware, we have
Yeah.
software, uh, we have like the whole science behind it. So it's a more complicated environment than I think most of the company that we kind of know, like software-based only companies. So that's challenging. And how do you kind of combine between
Yeah.
all of them and leverage on them instead of them
Yeah.
contradicting?
Well, and I
So that's another
and
challenge.
like you said, there's the software, there's a hardware, there's a lot going on at Lumen. And I'm also wondering, there's a lot of discussion about as a product manager to be successful, it's really important to have this technical background, right? Especially when you're talking to engineers, all of this aspect. And at Lumen, I think there's a whole nother nuance that you can add where it's not even just technical background, but also scientific and knowing the biology and
Yes.
how important metabolic data is, all of that. How did you deal with those gaps that you maybe had coming in?
Um, so I agree it's exactly on the same level of knowing technology or not, so understanding the science or not. On one hand, myself and what I expect from the PMs is to understand
Okay.
enough. you can't be like completely ignorant, right? You need to understand the technology enough. You need to understand the science enough. You need to understand enough in machine learning, right? So you need to have enough understanding. But of course, we no chance we cannot be the expert in any
Right.
one of them. And then, so what we're doing, so for example, in what we a change we did not long ago. So for example, in the squads teams in Lumen, not only we have the, let's say, the usual trio of product designer, engineer, and product, right? We also have a data scientist in the team. We also have a domain expert in the team because we need a domain expert with us on the
Exactly.
day-to-day in our work because right? And even the domain expert, by the way, in many cases, they will be a generalist domain expert, but they might need to, I don't know, we need to maybe understand something very specific in nutrition, and they might find the relevant person specializing in that specific question. But having on the team also the data scientist and also the domain expert, that's an example of how we bridge such
Yeah,
a gap.
no, that's excellent. And I'm going back to that idea of creating an environment where you're comfortable to, say you don't know, right? Say you don't know something, ask questions, all of that. And I think that seems like it's very clear that's what you've built at Lumen. So it's great. Okay, Tamar, I want to
Yeah.
finish off with a fun question. What is your favorite product and why?
Okay, so the product that as a user I love the most, I think is really
Oh,
Spotify.
I agree.
Uh, it's a product and a service I use all the time, and it's so seamless and it's so great and it meets my needs all the time. When I know what I want to listen to, when I don't know and I want a specific mood, they're doing such a great job. I love it
Yeah.
completely.
I
So that's
love
my
it. I
favorite
love
one.
it. And I could very much agree. That's for me, music it really like changes my mood. It makes me feel happier, and Spotify is the answer to that. So I love it. All right, Tamar, I really thank you so much for coming on the show. I learned so much. It was so excellent, and I'm excited for others to learn from you. So really, thank you.